Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're tackling a big one, quality in education.
Hmm. Sounds like a pretty complex topic.
Oh, it definitely is. And to make sure we don't get lost in the weeds, we're using excerpts from an educational management course document as a guide.
Interesting. What kind of stuff does it cover?
It's mostly focused on quality management in education, but I've already found myself rethinking how we define quality in general, even before getting into the document.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's one of those words everyone uses, but probably has a slightly different definition for.
Exactly. Like, what does quality even mean when we're talking about something as complex as education?
Right, that's a good question. So where do we start with all this?
Well, our source material outlines 5 different approaches to defining quality. They were identified by a guy named Garvin back in 1984.
5 different approaches. Sounds like there's no simple answer.
Nope, not at all.
And some of them feel a bit outdated now, but others feel incredibly relevant to today's world. Like the first one, the transcendental approach says quality is something you just know when you see it. It's based on intuition and pre-established standards.
Hmm, I can see that. Like, you can often tell if someone's a good teacher just by watching them in action.
Yeah, exactly. But that approach doesn't seem very practical for making decisions about, say, an entire education system.
Right, it's very subjective.
Okay, so then there's the product-based approach, which is all about measurable results. Think standardized tests, graduation rates, things like that.
Ah, the classic data-driven approach.
Exactly. But is that really the whole picture when it comes to education?
It can be limiting. What about things that are hard to measure, like creativity or critical thinking?
That's where some of the other approaches come in. The consumer-based approach looks at quality from the perspective of students, parents, employers, even society as a whole.
Interesting. So it's like asking, are graduates actually prepared for the real world? Right. Are they equipped with the skills employers are looking for? Can they think critically and solve problems?
Makes sense. That definitely adds another layer to the definition of quality.
Okay, so then there's the process-based approach, which focuses on making sure the educational processes themselves are efficient and meet certain standards.
Okay, so this is more about the nuts and bolts of how education is delivered.
Yeah, things like curriculum development, teacher training, those kinds of
It
things.
sounds like a lot to keep track of.
And last but not least, we have the value-based approach, which looks at the relationship between cost and quality.
Ah, the eternal struggle of limited resources.
Exactly. It's about trying to achieve the best possible outcomes given the constraints of budgets and available funding.
I imagine that can be a really tough balancing act for school administrators.
Wow, hearing all these different approaches laid out like that, it really shows there's no single definition of quality in education. It depends on who you ask and what their priorities are.
You're right, it's much more nuanced than I initially realized. So how do we even begin to assess quality in education with all these different perspectives floating around?
Well, our source material also outlines 7 key characteristics that contribute to overall quality. It's kind of like a checklist for building a strong educational foundation.
A checklist, okay. What's the first item?
The first one is strategic planning, which is about having a clear vision and setting goals for where you want to go as an educational institution or system.
Makes sense. You can't just wander aimlessly and expect to achieve great results.
Exactly. Then there's continuous improvement, which is about always looking for ways to do things better.
So education is a journey, not a destination.
Right. It's about adapting to new challenges, embracing new knowledge, and always striving for excellence. And next up, we have processes and techniques.
Processes and techniques, what's that all about?
It focuses on finding the best teaching and learning processes to effectively, turn those students into capable individuals.
Ah, okay, so it's about how we teach, not just what we teach.
Precisely. And then there's the importance of teamwork. The source calls it quality control group.
So not just one person is responsible for ensuring quality, it's a collective effort.
Exactly. It takes collaboration, communication, and a shared commitment to excellence. And it's not limited to educators either. They call the next characteristic total involvement.
So it's about bringing everyone to the table, students, parents, the community.
Right. It's recognizing that everyone has a role to play in supporting quality education. Then there's customer focus, which is about treating everyone involved in the education system, students, parents, teachers, everyone, as valued customers.
Interesting. That's like flipping the script on the traditional view of education, huh?
It kind of is. It's about recognizing that everyone has needs and expectations and striving to create a positive experience for all involved.
Makes sense. What's the last characteristic?
It's measurement, which is about using data and assessment to track progress, evaluate effectiveness, and identify areas for improvement.
Ah, so it's about holding the system accountable and making sure we're actually achieving those goals we set back in strategic planning.
Exactly. It's like checking your compass to make sure you're still on course.
So we have these 7 characteristics: strategic planning, continuous improvement, processes and techniques, quality control group, total involvement, customer focus, and measurement.
Did you memorize all that? That's impressive.
Well, I try. It's interesting, though, how they all connect and build on each other.
It's like a complex ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
All the parts working together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. But I'm also curious about the practical side of things. How do we actually put these ideas into practice?
That's a great question. And luckily, our source material dives into specific strategies for promoting quality, starting with early childhood education.
Perfect. Let's hear it. What are some key strategies for ensuring quality in those early years?
So we're talking pre-K and elementary school here, right?
Exactly. It's amazing how much emphasis is placed on these early years in the document. It's like they're saying the foundation for a quality education is built way before kids even set foot in a high school.
It makes sense, though, doesn't it? Those early years are so crucial for development.
Absolutely. And the document specifically highlights the importance of institutionalizing preschool education.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It's about creating a more structured and standardized approach to early childhood education, so it's not just haphazard. Things like having a set curriculum for preschool and providing adequate training for teachers.
Ah, so it's not just about playtime anymore.
Right. It's about recognizing that even those early years are critical time for learning and development, and they need to be treated with the same level of intentionality as later stages of education.
So setting those kiddos up for success right from the start, but I imagine that requires a lot from teachers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's another big theme that runs through the document, strengthening teacher quality across the board, but especially at the primary level.
Okay, so what does that involve? More training.
Yep, they talk a lot about both pre-service and in-service training, making sure teachers have the skills and knowledge they need to be effective in the classroom, and that those skills are continually being updated.
Yeah, the world's changing so fast these days. Staying up to date is crucial in just about every field, but especially education, I imagine.
Definitely. And then there's the issue of infrastructure. The document stresses the importance of improving school facilities, particularly in more rural areas.
Right, because every student deserves a safe and stimulating learning environment, no matter where they live.
Exactly. A child's zip code shouldn't determine their access to quality education. And then the final point they make about primary education is enhancing the actual teaching and learning processes themselves.
Okay, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. What does that look like?
It's about using things like technology integration, developing what they call smart schools, and making sure there are robust evaluation systems in place so we know students are actually learning and progressing.
It's like taking the pulse of the education system, making sure everything's running smoothly and making adjustments as needed.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's shift gears and talk about secondary education. The document outlines some similar themes, a focus on program improvement, addressing infrastructure needs, things like that.
Sure, but I imagine there are also some unique challenges and strategies specific to that age group.
Oh, absolutely. One of the key strategies they highlight is strengthening the curriculum itself.
Interesting. What does that entail? Adding new subjects.
It's actually more about going deeper, going beyond just rote memorization of facts and figures. They talk about developing essential life skills like critical thinking, problem solving, communication, even things like civic responsibility.
It sounds like they're trying to prepare students for a lot more than just passing exams.
Exactly. It's about equipping them to be successful in life, not just in school. And of course, there's the emphasis on science education.
Given how tech-driven the world is becoming, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. We need to equip students with the skills and knowledge to thrive in a world that's increasingly shaped by science and technology.
So how do they suggest improving science education specifically?
Well, they propose a three-pronged approach, providing quality teacher training in science, giving schools better lab facilities, and promoting more hands-on experiential learning. It's about making science engaging and relevant to students' lives.
I can definitely get behind that. Who doesn't love a good science experiment?
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like that old saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn.
Words to live by. But even with the best curriculum and teaching methods, there's still the issue of teacher shortages, especially in rural areas and specialized subjects.
Right, that's an ongoing challenge, and the document acknowledges that it needs to be addressed if we want to see real improvements in quality.
So what are some of the solutions they propose?
Incentives. Making the teaching profession more attractive, offering better pay and working conditions, providing more support for teachers.
Makes sense. If you want to attract and retain talented individuals, you need to create a supportive and rewarding environment.
Absolutely. And finally, they highlight the importance of things like extracurricular activities and community involvement.
Ah, so it's not just about what happens inside the classroom.
Right, it's about creating a more holistic educational experience that extends beyond the school walls and into the community. It's recognizing that education isn't just about academics. It's about developing well-rounded individuals.
I like that. It takes a village, right?
Exactly. So all of these specific strategies, from preschool all the way to high school, they're all geared towards the same overarching goal.
Oh, and what's that?
It's about producing individuals who are not just knowledgeable, but also adaptable, resilient, ethical, creative, people who are equipped to navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world.
Future-ready individuals.
Exactly. People who can not only survive, but actually thrive in a world we can barely imagine today. And it's not just about individual success either.
You're right. We were talking earlier about the importance of considering the needs of society as a whole.
Exactly. Our source material makes a really compelling point about the link between quality education and national well-being.
That makes sense. A well-educated population is usually seen as key to economic growth and progress.
Right. They specifically mention Malaysia in the document and how a strong education system is considered crucial for achieving the country's goals for economic development.
It's like investing in education is investing in the future of the nation.
Exactly. And they emphasize the need to develop individuals with strong leadership skills, innovative thinking, the ability to adapt and compete in the global market.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. And what's interesting is that they don't just talk about economic benefits. They also highlight the role of education in promoting things like social cohesion, creating a shared national identity, building a more just and equitable society.
Right. So it's not just about like GDP and job creation. It's about the overall well-being of a nation and its people.
Exactly. And I think that really speaks to the power of education. It's not just about individual advancement. It's about creating a better future for everyone.
It's inspiring to think about it that way, but also a bit daunting, Like, education has this huge responsibility to get it right.
You're telling me. It makes me think about those different approaches to defining quality we talked about earlier, like remember the transcendental approach, the product-based approach, all those.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how those different perspectives might play out on a national level.
Right. Like if a country really emphasizes a product-based approach, they might focus heavily on standardized testing and measurable outcomes. While another country that prioritizes a consumer-based approach might put more emphasis on meeting the needs of students and families.
It's interesting to think about how those different philosophies could lead to very different education systems, even if they're all striving for quality.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize that there are always trade-offs involved in these decisions. What's considered high quality to one person or group might not be seen the same way by others.
It's about finding that balance, I guess, between individual needs and societal needs, between tradition and innovation, and between all these different perspectives on what makes for a valuable education.
Ugh, my brain's starting to hurt.
I hear you. Maybe we should take a little break and let all this information sink in for a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back to wrap things up and offer some final thoughts on this deep dive into quality in education. Phew. We covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really did. From defining quality to exploring strategies for improvement, it's amazing how much there is to consider.
I feel like my brain is still buzzing with all the information, trying to make sense of it all. What about you? What stood out to you the most from our conversation?
Tough question. I think what really struck me is that quality in education isn't just some fixed idea. It's always evolving along with the world around us. What was considered a good education 50 years ago might not cut it today.
Right. Like, think about all the technology that's become a part of our lives and how that's completely changed the way we learn and work.
Exactly. Education needs to keep pace with those changes, and that means constantly questioning our assumptions and being open to new ideas and approaches.
It's like we can't afford to get stuck in the past if we want to prepare students for the future.
Absolutely. And that requires a lot of dialogue and collaboration between, well, everyone involved: educators, policymakers, parents,
It
communities.
really does take a village, doesn't it?
For sure. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me. We all have a role to play in shaping quality education, and we need to keep those conversations going.
It's about acknowledging that education is this shared responsibility, not just something that happens within the four walls of a classroom.
Right. And it's something that impacts us all, whether we're students ourselves or not.
Thinking about our listener, what do you hope they walk away from this deep dive thinking about?
Hmm. Well, I hope they've gained a deeper understanding of just how complex this idea of quality in education really is.
And how there's no easy answer.
Exactly. But beyond that, I hope they're also inspired to get involved in the conversation about education in their own communities, whether it's advocating for policies that support quality learning, volunteering at a local school, or just talking to their kids about their education.
Yeah, those are all great ideas. Even small actions can make a difference.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that education isn't just this abstract concept, it's something that impacts real people, real communities, and the future of our world.
Well said. It all comes back to that idea of shared responsibility and recognizing that we're all in this together.
Right. So I guess that's our challenge to the listener, isn't it? To keep learning, to keep questioning, to keep engaging in those conversations, and to never stop advocating for quality education for all.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're signing off for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into quality in education.
Until next time.